The trailer for the final episode revealed quite a lot of interesting details. However, those scenes with Jax where some really strange things are happening are still a mystery. I couldn't shake the feeling that I've seen this somewhere before. And that's exactly why today we're going to discuss how Kelphmo's room and past can help us predict what's going to happen with Jax in episode 9, how the digital circus will end for this character, and we'll also take a more detailed look at the characters' rooms, because there's way more hidden in them than it might seem at first glance. First, let's talk about Jax's mental state in the final episode. It will consist of 3 stages, and the first one is anger, gradually turning into depression. Over the last 3 episodes, Jax has slowly been revealed to us as the most depressed character in the show. Behind the mask of a sarcastic, fun-loving guy, there's actually a fragile personality that simply cannot accept the reality of the digital circus. He constructed a made-up world for himself where everything felt fine. However, once events started going outside of his usual worldview, everything began falling apart. Constant fear and ongoing panic attacks, the inability to accept help and support from others. All of this creates that massive cocktail of internal issues. After the release of episode 8, we were shown a teaser where Jax is staring at the floor with a blank expression, completely separated from everyone else. Even back then, you could already assume that Jax would cut off all ties with the other characters entirely. After watching the trailer, we became convinced that the first few minutes after what happened will be pretty disorienting for Jax. He doesn't understand what's going on. And after that, he starts actively showing his aggression. The problem is that none of this is going to help either Jax or the others, and the rabbit himself understands that perfectly well. Because of his fragile character, he has no choice but to fully sink into his own struggles. In the first half of episode 9, Jax's depression will gradually get worse and transform into the second stage, which is madness. Several scenes from the trailer show us Jax from a very unusual angle. His expression and behavior genuinely create a really unsettling feeling. An empty and unhinged stare, a forced smile, strange movements. All of this is the result of a severe depressive state, combined with negative external factors. Jax's inability to accept help might become the defining issue for this character, and it will ultimately lead to the third stage, which is destabilization. The trailer shows that the characters will remain in this state for quite a long time, which means all the previous stages of Jax's mental breakdown can actually lead to full destabilization. In that case, Jax's personality will gradually start to fall apart, so to speak. None of his actions will have any rational explanation, and he'll completely lose control over himself and his own mind. We've already seen all of this in Kaufmo's case, who also went from a fake, cheerful guy to a completely broken personality. His room is a perfect reflection of the destabilization stage that he went through, and this image directly references the scene involving Jax. We see a very similar environment surrounding both characters, but while Kaufmo is facing his abstracted version, Jax is turned away. It's pretty clear that this is just a vision and not some actual location with an abstracted creature inside. We already talked about how abstraction is a programmed process that doesn't depend on Kane. Even though Kane can quickly identify a glitch in the code while it's still fixable, he can't fully restore a character once they've reached the terminal stage, which means this process can easily still occur even with Kane deleted. Also, I was genuinely intrigued by this scene from the trailer where Pomni walks into Jax's room and then says his name in a scared and uncertain voice. Obviously, she witnessed something horrifying. However, it's unlikely that it will be abstraction. At this point, I'm fairly confident that none of the current cast will turn into that kind of creature in the digital circus finale. However, if in Kaufmo's case he actually became a monster, Jax might have a completely different outcome. I've already put forward a theory that because of a breakdown in his code, Jax might enter a state of what you could call a permanent hallucination, where his life feels just as joyful as it once used to. In that case, this scene with Ribbit might not be a pleasant memory, but rather something that's actively happening inside Jax's head right now. At the beginning of the video, I also mentioned that I wanted to talk about the topic of rooms in the digital circus, because just from Kaufmo's example alone, we can see how much this location both affects and depends on the character. But let's go over everything step by step. Before we start, I just want to say, love yourself. Pomni's room was shown to us way back in episode 2, and we can pretty much immediately notice a few unusual details. Pomni's bed looks way too large for her. Same goes for the nightstand, the chair, and the table. The mirror in Pomni's room also looks far too big. And the funny part is that it's apparently there so Pomni could see herself at full height. But if you simply compare Pomni's size to the size of that mirror, it's pretty obvious that would be rather difficult. Even the toys in Pomni's room look way too oversized for her. You could say the same thing about the blocks, but if you look at their size across the other rooms, you'll realize that's just the standard size for those items. Considering that Pomni herself is the smallest character in the digital circus, while her room clearly wasn't designed with that in mind at all, we can understand that Pomni's room acts as a reflection of the oppression that comes from the digital circus itself. We all know Zubal's main problem that she brought up back in episode 3. I hate this body. I hate all these stupid removable pieces. I just want to find something that feels right. Not accepting your own body is a pretty common struggle that the show creators conveyed through Zubal's character. Now, take a closer look at her room. Incredibly unusual wallpaper and carpet, Zubal's box where she keeps all her parts, a large number of mirrors, a marble statue of a woman from the Renaissance era. All of these details essentially remind Zubal every single day of the internal struggles she lives with. The mirrors force her to look at herself constantly. The box with parts won't let her settle down and find peace with one thing. And the marble statue reflects the kind of appearance Zubal wishes she had.
At this point, after breaking down Zubal's and Pomni's rooms, we already understand pretty well that each character's room was deliberately designed to constantly remind them of their main issues. We're not talking about some big picture problems related to well-being or their life as a whole, but rather specific internal struggles and the things that bother these characters every single day. It's very possible that in the real world, Pomni was short and that this was genuinely a problem for her. Her room basically reflects that. In this context, it's incredibly interesting to talk about Jax's room. And since in episode 7 we were shown a very dark scene where it's pretty hard to make anything out, we're going to look at the colored version of his room. From the very first seconds, you can tell this is a room designed for a young girl. Everything is pink, there are rainbows, some kind of small table and chairs, a pink diary sitting on an equally pink table. We know Jax is a young 22-year-old guy, but the question is, why does his room look like it belongs to a 5-year-old girl? This is where things get more interesting, because earlier I said that a room reflects the genuine inner struggles of the characters. So then why does Jax's room look like this? There's a theory that because of Jax, a car crash happened, and the image of the person Jax hurt got burned into his memory so deeply that it literally began haunting him. That event likely became the biggest emotional wound in Jax's life, and that's exactly why his room looks the way it does. However, like I already mentioned, this is just a theory, and to me, the reason behind this interior feels completely different. In our previous videos, we already discussed the fact that deep down, Jax is actually a very sensitive and sentimental character behind all that performative toughness. Come on, Sadie, you're coming with me. I'm actually going to be on a team with Zubal. What? No, you're not. We've been together for every team adventure in the past. This is simply an attempt to hide behind a tough guy mask that has nothing to do with who he actually is. Most likely after losing his close friends, Jax decided to act in a way that would ensure no one would ever want to get close to him again, stripping himself of even the smallest chance of going through the same pain Jax experienced after the abstraction of Kaufmo and Ribbit. So this way we understand that Jax's room reflects his inner vulnerability, because inside the body of a 22-year-old man, there's a deeply sensitive person hiding, who is afraid of absolutely everything. Wrapping up this midpoint, we can see that the character rooms were created by the digital circus itself, based on the fears, personal struggles, and inner conflicts of the characters. They were deliberately designed this way to wear down the circus residents even further, not letting them find any peace inside this digital prison. On top of that,
The show creators designed the rooms in a way that lets us immediately understand what specific problem is weighing on each character, reflecting a great deal of what actually happens in the real world. How many people hide their true self behind some kind of mask? How many struggle to find themselves or deal with difficulties because of circumstances beyond their control? Even if we look at Ragatha's room, we see a piano. Everyone remembers Raga's relationship with her mom. Maybe the piano was a reflection of failed attempts to build a genuine connection with parents who are never satisfied with their child. Or take Gangle, whose room is probably the most stylish, but at the same time the darkest, and so to speak, the most unsettling. Her room reflects the inner struggles of people dealing with emotional instability, since constant mood swings without any clear reason often don't allow a person to find calm, pushing them deeper and deeper into darkness. At least that's how I see it. And of course, if you've got your own thoughts on this, I'd love to see them in the comments. Today's video turned out to be a fairly light one, since I'm currently putting together material for something really interesting. But that's not what we're talking about right now. See you soon!